can now speak to Ben Jamal, who is one of the organisers of the pro-Palestinian march today. Ben, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Peter.
Can I just ask you why you thought it was appropriate to hold a march on Armistice Day?
Well, I should say, first of all, we're not marching because it's Armistice Day. We've been marching every Saturday for the past 4 weeks. Some weeks ago, when we feared that a ceasefire would not be implemented immediately, and we looked ahead, we liaised with the police. We discussed all of the plans when we're marching with the police, and we said that on Armistice Day, on November the 11th, we would not want to disrupt the preparations for the Remembrance Sunday commemoration, so we would march away from London. But there is a second bit of your question, I guess, Peter, because there's a sort of narrative at the moment that it's always been seen as disrespectful somehow to march on the Saturday before Remembrance Sunday. Well, that's never been the case in previous years. There have been marches in most of the last few years, most significantly in 2018. There was a huge pro-Brexit rally that took place in Trafalgar Square just a few hundred yards from the Cenotaph on the Saturday before Remembrance Sunday, attended, I'm sure, by many Conservative MPs, perhaps by Suella Braverman, certainly by many of the people making the argument that it's disrespectful to march on that day.
Ben, it's interesting because I'm not sure whether that actual day, I'd need to go back on the calendar and look, was actually Armistice Day itself, but we're probably splitting hairs on that one. The point, I suppose, that a number of people feel is that you have decided to, you've been marching for the last 4 weeks. We know what you think, we're aware of your views, but today many people say that Armistice Day itself should be sacrosanct.
Well, again, look, I mean, normally, I was born and bred in this country. I know that the main commemorations of remembrance take place on a Sunday. And by the law of averages, November the 11th normally falls on a working day. And most people continue working. Parliament doesn't stop on November the 11th. We don't cease all democratic activity.
But that democratic activity isn't controversial and offensive to many people, as your march is, whether you like it or not.
Well, you know, people regard something as controversial if they don't agree with it, don't they? But we're calling for a ceasefire. 76% of the British public support the call for a ceasefire.
What's your evidence for that? What's your evidence for that?
Regard this as opinion polls, reliable opinion polls. I think the last one was by Sky News. I think you would probably regard them as a reliable outfit. Showed that 76% of the British people support the call for a ceasefire. So I'm not sure, Peter, on what grounds you're saying calling for a ceasefire is a controversial view.
Well, it's certainly controversial for many people. It's controversial internationally. It is something that is the subject of debate.
It's controversial for those who don't agree with it, who are in a minority, isn't it?
Do you think a ceasefire would stop Hamas bombing? Would they observe it necessarily?
Well, historically, in previous situations such as 2014, 2021, whenever there has been an escalation in conflict and a ceasefire has been called, it has actually been Hamas who's respected it and Israel who's broken it. So if you look historically...
Well, there was a ceasefire, Ben, was there? Sorry to interrupt you, Ben, but there was a ceasefire, was there not, on the 6th of October, and then Hamas terrorists broke it on the 7th of October with their attacks.
Well, that's a really interesting way of describing a ceasefire. Let's look at what you're saying there. If we only take 2023 as a measure, from January the 1st to October the 6th, Israel had killed over 250 Palestinians, including dozens of children, in the West Bank. Many of those also killed by armed Israeli settlers facilitated by the IDF, who in 1 week alone set fire to 17 Palestinian villages. So if that's your version of a ceasefire, I'm not quite sure you and I have a common understanding of what that means. But if we go back even further, of course, Israel's been enacting a decades-long military occupation that is illegal under international law. I'm not sure under what notion of ceasefire you suggest the military enforcement of an illegal occupation is a ceasefire. The Palestinian people have not had a ceasefire since 1948.
Well, perhaps
when
we can
cleansed from their lands in large numbers, and a system of oppression was imposed upon them.
Ben, let's perhaps find common ground on another matter. We have on the 7th of October attacks by Hamas. You have people on the march. I'm not saying you're necessarily personally associated with them at all, but there are people on the march that you have organised who have had absolutely deeply offensive and illegal chants that they've been doing. They have had effigies of dead babies bouncing on a Palestinian
flag.
What sort
of chants, Peter? What chants? What chants are you talking about?
Chants?
So
well, if someone calls for jihad, for example, if someone says that Hamas should be supported, if someone says that Israel is committing genocide on people in Gaza, those are deeply offensive to many people, and some of them are illegal. But in terms of common ground, I'm sure you would condemn that, and I'm sure you would agree with me that Hamas is a terrorist organisation.
Well, look, you brought a lot of things together there. Let's pick up two of them. So I've been on all of these demonstrations. I've not heard anybody chant jihad. I think what you're referring to is one individual at a demonstration organised by an organisation called Hizb ut-Tahrir that have nothing to do with us. We have no association with them, attended by 30 people, at which one individual made a speech in which he used the word jihad.
There are absolutely people on the march that you have organised who are supporting Hamas. There are absolutely people on the march that you have organised supporting Hamas.
Peter, well, you know, if they are and they're declaring their support for Hamas, and if by doing that they are declaring their support for the targeting and killing of civilians, which is against international law, then they don't share the principles on which we're marching. But let me come back to something else you said, Peter. You said it's offensive to say that Israel is committing a genocide. I presume you're aware that 800 scholars of crimes against humanity and genocide studies have said that this is becoming a textbook case of genocide because of the numbers of people being killed and because of the stated intentions of Israeli ministers, including an Israeli minister who has called for Israel to drop a nuclear bomb.
Can you just
on the people of Gaza. Let me finish, Peter. Peter, let me finish. He remains in post. The defence minister who remains in post has said Israel is not dealing with human beings, it's dealing with inhuman animals and should treat them
we're
like
here.
that.
I'm not going to, Ben, if you let me talk.
Plans for the ethnic cleansing of the entire population of Gaza.
Ben, if you'll just let me talk. I mean, one point that you didn't quite clarify in what you're saying earlier, and I mean, I'm not here to defend Benjamin Netanyahu or his government. There are many things I disagree with what they've done. But, I mean, do you agree with me that Hamas is a terrorist organisation?
Well, the principle I use is international law, because I think actually the only benchmark we have is international law. And international law makes clear that the targeting and killing of civilians, the taking of hostages, and the imposition of collective punishment on entire people are against international law. So I condemn anybody who does that.
Do you condemn Hamas? Can you just give me a yes or no, Ben? Can you just give me a yes or no? Are Hamas terrorists? Yes or no?
Peter, if you let me speak, then I'll give you an answer. So the question you've asked me, do I condemn Hamas for its targeting and killing of civilians on October 7th?
Ben, that's not my question. That is not my question. My question is, are Hamas terrorists, yes or no?
Well, that's actually the question you've asked. Hamas is prescribed as a terrorist organisation. But what I'm trying to say to you, and you're not listening to me, Peter, is the benchmark, because we throw around words like terrorism. People use that sometimes to describe
I don't think we're throwing around a word when they take 239 hostages of innocent Israeli people. I think I'm very happy to say definitively, with the dictionary definition.
You're not going to listen to my answers. We can talk over each other.
Well, Ben, you're not answering my questions. You're not answering my questions, Ben.
We can talk, Peter, you can try to shout me down if you want to.
I'm not trying to shout you down, I'm trying to get an answer. I'm trying to make you speak, I'm trying to get an answer.
A march. If you are going to keep talking over me, then with respect, I'll terminate the interview. I've given you a very, very clear answer. If I want to put a question back to you, do you condemn Israel? Do you condemn Israel for its violations of international law, for its indiscriminate bombing of civilians, and for its imposition of a siege that is cutting off food, fuel, and essential medical supplies
conducting the interview,
to the people of Gaza?
I'm conducting the interview here.
Do you condemn Israel for committing those
I don't want any innocent civilian to die. I don't want any innocent civilian to die at all.
We're not on the same page. We're not on the same page in terms of our respect for international law. So I'm not sure we've got a lot more to talk about. I've got a march to organise. If you have any further questions you're going to allow me to answer, I'll give you one more question. It's up to you if you want to continue with the interview.
Could I ask a question, please?
Yes, Peter Blacksley, go ahead.
Hello, Ben.
You don't have any more questions for me, Peter. If you don't have any more questions,
I'll come back to you in a minute.
I probably need to go on and organise thousands of people who want to march for peace.
Ben, stay with us if you can. My guest, Peter Blexley, who's a former Metropolitan Police detective, wants to ask you a question.
I don't have time. I don't have time for any more, Peter. I do have a march to organise. I was told this was going to be 3 minutes. I've answered most of your questions.
Well, you haven't answered whether you think Hamas are terrorists or not, Ben.
I've given you the answer. I've told you very clearly the framework of international law, which I respect, and it should be applied indiscriminately. And I think the disagreement between you and me is you don't think that should apply to Israel. That's your moral choice. I know the moral choices I'm making.
I haven't said that, Ben.
I'm going off now, Peter.
Okay, Ben. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Ben.
To march for peace and then call for a ceasefire.
Ben, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. That was Ben Jamal, who is one of the organisers. Sadly, Peter Blexley. What would you have asked him, Peter?
Do you want Hamas to survive as an organisation?
Yeah. Good question. I mean, we didn't get an answer in terms of whether he thought there were... I don't think there was... Alicia, am I being unfair here? Did he give me an answer on whether he thought Hamas were terrorists or not? I am not any the wiser as to his view.
He didn't, but I have to be honest, this is like what I hate about this debate. I hate the fact that it's becoming these argumentative, like you know, like people just firing stuff at each other. It just shouldn't be like that. At the end of the day, this war's a bloodbath. There are innocent people dying. I just think that is exactly where this debate just goes slightly wrong. I'm not saying that to you specifically.
No, of course.
I just mean in general, I'm just like, can we just cut this back and just answer questions? 1 second. Answer questions straight up when you're asked. Like, you know, you obviously asked him a question, he kind of skirted around it. If he just gave you a straight answer, that'd be fine. But at the same time, I just hate this going at each other. It's such a somber topic.
It is a somber day, but I also wanted an answer, you know.
Ben Jamal refused to answer the question. Is Hamas a terrorist organisation?
But I mean, even prior to Peter asking that, it was still it's quite an argumentative.
It's certainly. Listen, I was tough on him as I'm tough on most of my guests, and I just wanted straightforward answers from him. I think Ben Jamal and I probably disagree politically on a number of things, and that's fair enough. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was just trying to get to the nub of the issue there. And Peter Blexley, I think there is a confusion in many people's minds that, I mean, it is so clear to me that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, for example. I think it's very clear to most of our viewers and listeners that it is as well. But we just didn't get that clarity there from the organiser of this pro-Palestinian march.
It's on the British statute book. Hamas is a terrorist organisation.
Yeah, and I'm not saying for a second, obviously, that he's a supporter of Hamas or anything like that. And this has been, of course, you know, everything I'm sure that Ben has been involved in himself has been totally peaceful and all the rest of it. But there was just... I find that a frustrating experience, I must say.
Look, he's clearly swallowed a dictionary, that fella, because he loves the sound of his own voice. And you can see how the naive, the gullible and the unworldly in their droves get seduced by his nonsense and consequently rock up at Hyde Park Corner with a Palestine flag. And I bet prior to the 7th of October, so many of those people wouldn't have been able to find Palestine on a map. You can see how he rabble-rouses